The Ravenshill Estate didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like an emotional battlefield. The Italian marble walls, which once reflected elegance and sophistication, now displayed streaks of red, blue, and green paint, as if three small, revolted artists had decided to rewrite the history of that place. And in a way, that's exactly what Eli, Noah, and Ben were doing. At 6 years old, the Wexler triplets didn't have the vocabulary for the pain they carried, so they used what they had: screams, mischief, and a mess that made any adult run far away. But Maya Coleman wasn't just any adult. When she crossed the gate that rainy October morning, with a worn backpack on her shoulders and a discreet smile on her face, something shifted in the air. She didn't know it yet, but that house had been waiting for someone who wouldn't run from the storm, someone who would embrace the chaos and transform it into something beautiful. And Maya had that in her blood. The first contact was brutal. As soon as she set foot in the main living room, a toy truck came flying inches from her head, smashing into the wall behind her. Noah, the middle one, stood there staring at her with those blue eyes full of challenge, as if saying, "If you're like the others, you can leave now." Maya took a deep breath, crouched down to pick up the broken toy, and looked at the boy with a calmness that unsettled him. "You have incredible aim. You know that," she said, without a hint of anger in her voice. "I bet if you threw a ball with that precision, you'd become the best pitcher in the Portland Youth League." The phrase caught Noah by surprise. No one had ever complimented one of his tantrums before. For the first time in weeks, he didn't know what to do. Eli and Ben, who were hiding behind the couch, peeked out curiously. Who was this woman who didn't yell, didn't cry, and didn't run away? Maya smiled again, this time more openly, and sat on the floor. "So, are you going to show me what else you can do, or are you going to keep testing me all morning?" The question sounded like an invitation, not a scolding. And there, in that minimal instant, she planted the first seed. It's funny how a single moment can change everything, isn't it? Makes you wonder what moments in your own life planted seeds you didn't even notice at the time. The following hours were a true emotional roller coaster. Maya discovered that the boys had turned the playroom into a fortress of blankets and overturned furniture, a refuge where they hid from the world and from the pain. Inside, there were drawings of a smiling woman holding 3 small children. Lena Wexler, the mother they had lost 6 months earlier in a car accident. Maya didn't ask anything. She just sat beside them on the cold floor, observed the drawings with respect, and whispered, "She was beautiful, wasn't she?" Ben, the youngest and most sensitive, started crying softly. Maya pulled him into her lap gently, and he didn't resist. Minutes later, Eli and Noah were also there, huddled around her in silence. It wasn't love yet. It was exhaustion. But it was also the first time someone allowed them to feel without judgment. And when you allow a child to feel, you open a door to their heart that no amount of money in the world can buy. Maya knew this because she had been that child once. Orphaned, lost, ignored by adults who didn't understand that wounded children don't need control. They need connection. As she held the 3 boys, she looked around the luxurious mansion and thought, money doesn't heal any shadows, only truth heals. And the truth here was simple. These boys were suffocating from longing, not from malice. The truth is a powerful thing, especially when it's spoken in silence. Maya understood that healing doesn't start with words. It starts with presence. She noticed how each boy had a different way of processing grief. Eli, the oldest by 3 minutes, tried to act tough, building walls around his emotions like he was protecting a castle. Noah, the middle child, channeled his pain into rebellion, testing boundaries to see who would stay when things got hard. And Ben, the baby of the trio, wore his heart on his sleeve, tears always close to the surface, desperately needing someone to tell him it was okay to be sad. Maya saw all of this in their eyes, in their body language, in the way they moved around each other like wounded soldiers in the same trench. She had seen it before in the mirror years ago, when she was the little girl nobody wanted to understand. The thing about trauma is that it doesn't just hurt, it isolates. It makes you believe you're the only one who feels this way, that your pain is too much for anyone else to handle. But Maya knew better. She had learned the hard way that sharing your shadows with someone who truly sees you is the first step toward letting the light back in. And these boys, they were drowning in shadows, waiting for someone brave enough to sit in the dark with them. When Adam Wexler arrived home that evening, he expected to find the same scene as always. A nanny crying in the kitchen asking to quit, the boys locked in their rooms, and the entire house upside down. But what he saw left him paralyzed. Maya was in the kitchen preparing mac and cheese, nothing fancy, just real food, while the three boys helped her stir the pot, wash lettuce, and set the table. They were laughing. Adam hadn't seen his sons laugh since Lena's funeral. He stood there, leaning against the doorway, not knowing whether he should enter or just watch this miracle unfold. Maya noticed his presence and nodded, as if to say, "Relax, everything's under control." But it wasn't control, it was presence. She hadn't tamed the boys, she had entered their world. Eli was the first to notice his father and ran up to him, holding a crumpled drawing. "Dad, look." Maya said, "We can make a mural in our room with memories of Mom." The boy's voice was full of enthusiasm, something Adam thought had died along with Lena. He felt a lump in his throat, crouched down, and hugged his son tightly. "That's an incredible idea, Eli," he managed to say, his voice choked with emotion. Noah and Ben soon joined the embrace, and Adam looked over the blonde little heads at Maya, who smiled discreetly from the kitchen. In that look, there was gratitude, but also fear. Fear that this would be temporary, fear that Maya would be just another fleeting person in their lives. But Maya had no plans to leave. As she arranged the dishes in the sink after dinner, she thought about how these boys were exactly like she had been, labeled as difficult when they were really just misunderstood. She remembered when she was 8 years old and was expelled from a foster home because she didn't adapt. The truth. She just wanted someone to ask how she was feeling. Nobody ever asked. But Maya swore to herself back then that if she ever had the chance to take care of someone, she would do it differently. And now, at 30 years old, after years working with children in vulnerable situations, she had finally found a place where she could truly make a difference. Ravenshill Estate wasn't just a mansion, it was an opportunity to prove that genuine love conquers any trauma. And Maya was ready for that battle. As she dried her hands and looked out the kitchen window, watching the rain fall over the illuminated gardens, she murmured to herself, "The revenge of grief is the mess, but truth always conquers the shadows." She didn't know it yet, but that phrase would become the mantra that would guide this family's entire journey. It makes you think, doesn't it? What mantras guide your life when things fall apart? Sometimes the answers we need are already inside us, waiting to be spoken out loud. The next morning, Maya woke up early and found the boys already awake, waiting for her in the living room. They had a proposal to show her the secret places of the mansion. Over the next hour, Maya was guided through hallways, dusty attics, and even a forgotten winter garden in the back of the property. Each place had a story, usually involving their mother. "This is where Mom read to us before bed," Ben said, pointing to an old armchair covered in dust. "And this is where she danced when she was happy," said Noah, spinning in the center of the winter garden. Maya listened to everything with full attention, unhurried, without judgment. She realized that the boys weren't just showing her the house, they were introducing Lena to her. It was as if they needed someone to know their mother, to truly trust them, and Maya understood perfectly. At the end of the tour, Eli held her hand and asked quietly, "Are you going to leave too?" The question hurt like a stab wound. Maya knelt at his level, looked into the boy's eyes, and answered firmly, "Not as long as you want me to stay." That wasn't an empty promise, it was a commitment, and Eli felt it. He hugged Maya tightly, and soon the other two joined in. There, in the middle of that messy and sincere embrace, Maya knew she had found her purpose. Over the following days, something extraordinary began to happen at Ravenshill Estate. The chaos didn't disappear overnight. That's not how healing works, but it started to transform. The paint-streaked walls became canvases for collaborative art projects. The overturned furniture was rearranged into reading nooks and imagination stations. The screams turned into laughter, and the tears, well, the tears were still there, but now they were accompanied by someone who held space for them. Maya introduced rituals that the boys had never experienced before. Every morning, they would gather in the kitchen for what she called gratitude breakfast, where each person shared one thing they were grateful for. At first, the boys resisted. "This is stupid," Noah would say, crossing his arms. But Maya never forced it. She just modeled it herself. "I'm grateful for the rain because it makes the flowers grow. I'm grateful for this oatmeal because it keeps us warm. I'm grateful for you three because you remind me why I do what I do." Slowly, the boys started participating. "I'm grateful for my dinosaur," Ben would say. "I'm grateful that Maya didn't leave," Eli would add quietly. These small moments of vulnerability were building blocks, tiny pieces of a foundation that had been shattered and was now being rebuilt, one honest word at a time. Maya also understood something that previous nannies had missed entirely. These boys didn't need discipline in the traditional sense. They needed boundaries, yes, but boundaries wrapped in love and consistency. She created a structure that felt safe, but not suffocating. Bedtime was 8 p.m., but there was a 30-minute wind-down period where they could talk about anything on their minds. Chores were required, but they were framed as family contributions rather than punishments. When the boys acted out, and they still did because trauma doesn't vanish in a week, Maya never responded with anger. She responded with curiosity. "What's really going on, buddy?" she would ask, sitting at their level. "Are you mad at me, or are you mad at something else?" This approach disarmed them every single time. Because here's the thing about children who are hurting. They're not trying to be bad. They're trying to communicate the only way they know how. And when an adult finally understands that language, magic happens. The boys began to trust that their feelings were valid, that their pain mattered, that they weren't too much for someone to handle. And that trust, that was the foundation for everything that would come next. It's incredible what happens when someone truly sees you, isn't it? Makes you wonder who in your life has really seen you, and who you might need to see more clearly yourself. Adam watched all of this unfold from the sidelines, equal parts amazed and ashamed. Amazed because Maya was accomplishing in days what he hadn't been able to do in months. Ashamed because he realized he had been trying to fix his sons the way he fixed business problems, with money, strategy, and distance. But grief doesn't respond to spreadsheets. Loss doesn't care about your net worth. And children, especially wounded children, need presence, not presence. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Adam found Maya sitting on the back porch, looking out at the garden. He grabbed 2 cups of coffee and joined her. "How do you do it?" he asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Maya turned to him, her expression soft but honest. "I don't do anything special, Mr. Wexler. I just show up. Every single day, I show up. And I let them know that no matter how messy things get, I'm not going anywhere." Adam felt his eyes sting with tears he'd been holding back for 6 months. "I don't know how to do that," he admitted. "I don't know how to be what they need." Maya smiled gently. "Then learn. They don't need you to be perfect, Adam. They just need you to be present. Start small. Read them a bedtime story. Ask them about their day. Sit with them when they cry instead of trying to fix it. That's all they want, your time and your heart." That conversation planted something in Adam that night. Not a solution, but a seed. And just like the seeds Maya had planted in his sons, this one would grow in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The truth was breaking through his shadows, slowly but surely. By the end of the first week, the transformation at Ravenshill Estate was undeniable. Carmen Soto, Adam's assistant, stopped by to drop off some documents and nearly didn't recognize the house. "What happened here?" she asked, looking around in disbelief. The walls were cleaner, the air felt lighter, and most shocking of all, there was laughter echoing from upstairs. "Maya happened," Adam said simply, a small smile crossing his face for the first time in what felt like years. Carmen raised an eyebrow. "Well, whatever she's doing, bottle it. The world could use more of that." And she was right. What Maya brought to Ravenshill wasn't magic, it was humanity. It was the simple, profound act of showing up for people who had been abandoned by everyone else. It was proof that sometimes the most broken places become the most beautiful when the right person refuses to give up on them. And as Maya tucked the boys into bed that night, reading them a story about brave knights and second chances, she knew this was just the beginning. The real work, the deep, soul-level healing, was still ahead. But for now, in this moment, 3 little boys who had forgotten how to hope were starting to believe again, and that was worth everything. If this story is making you feel something, hope, nostalgia, maybe even a little bit of your own buried pain, don't keep it to yourself. Pass it forward. Let someone else feel what you're feeling right now, because stories like this, they're meant to be shared. And who knows, maybe the person who needs to hear this message is just one share away from finding their own Maya, their own second chance, their own proof that truth always conquers the shadows. Adam Wexler wasn't supposed to be in this position. At 35 years old, he had built a tech empire that rivaled Silicon Valley's biggest names, Wexler Tech, a company specializing in AI-driven logistics solutions, was valued at over $3 billion. Forbes had called him the visionary under 40. TechCrunch dubbed him the man who solved supply chain chaos. But none of those accolades meant anything when he stood in the hallway of his own home, listening to his sons scream behind closed doors, feeling more powerless than he'd ever felt in his entire life. Success in business had taught him how to strategize, optimize, and execute. But grief didn't come with a manual, loss didn't respond to algorithms, and 3 traumatized 6-year-olds couldn't be fixed with a venture capital pitch. Adam had tried everything money could buy: child psychologists, behavior specialists, elite nannies with Ivy League credentials. They all lasted less than a week. The irony wasn't lost on him. He could negotiate multi-million-dollar deals with Fortune 500 CEOs, but he couldn't get his own children to stop throwing toys at strangers. The truth was beginning to surface through the cracks. Maybe he didn't have a nanny problem. Maybe he had a connection problem. The morning Maya arrived for her interview, Adam almost cancelled. He had been up until 3 a.m. on a conference call with investors in Tokyo, his eyes bloodshot, his patience worn thin. The last thing he wanted was another idealistic candidate who would promise the world and quit after day 1. But Carmen Soto, his assistant and the only person who dared to tell him hard truths, insisted. "This one's different," she said, handing him a cup of black coffee. "She doesn't have fancy degrees or celebrity references. But she's got something those other nannies didn't. She actually understands pain." Adam frowned. "What does that even mean?" Carmen shrugged. "Read her background, check. Grew up in the foster system, worked with at-risk youth for a decade. She's not here for the paycheck, Adam. She's here because she knows what it's like to be those boys." That got his attention. He skimmed Maya's application one more time. No university degree, no formal childcare certifications, just years of grassroots work with organizations that helped kids nobody else wanted to help. It was unconventional, maybe even risky. But conventional had failed spectacularly. So when Maya walked into his office that morning, Adam made a decision that would change everything. He listened, really listened. And what he heard shook him to his core. Maya didn't pitch herself like the others. She didn't talk about behavioral modification techniques or structured curriculum plans. Instead, she asked him a question that no one else had. "Mister, Wexler, when was the last time you cried with your sons? The question landed like a punch to the gut. Adam blinked, caught completely off guard. Excuse me. Maya didn't flinch. Grief is a shared experience. Your boys lost their mother. But you lost your wife. Have they ever seen you grieve? Have you ever let them know that it's okay to fall apart? Adam felt his jaw tighten. I'm trying to be strong for them. They need stability, not a father who can't hold it together. Maya leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. With all due respect, Mr. Wexler, they don't need a robot. They need a human. And right now, you're teaching them that pain should be buried, that emotions are weaknesses. That's why they're acting out. They're screaming because you won't. The words hit harder than any business critique ever had. Because deep down, Adam knew she was right. He had spent 6 months building walls, throwing himself into work, avoiding the gaping hole in his chest where Lena used to be, and his sons. They had learned to do the same. Only their walls looked like destruction instead of detachment. Maya saw right through him, just like she had seen through the boys. And for the first time since the accident, Adam felt something crack open inside him. It wasn't comfortable, but it was real. Have you ever had someone speak a truth you've been running from? It's terrifying and liberating all at once. After the interview, Adam sat alone in his office for nearly an hour, staring at the framed photo on his desk. It was from 2 years ago. Lena, radiant and laughing, holding all 3 boys at the beach. She had always been the emotional center of their family. While Adam obsessed over quarterly reports and product launches, Lena was the one who remembered birthday parties, organized playdates, and tucked the boys in with bedtime stories every single night. She was the glue. And when she died, everything fell apart. Adam had tried to compensate by throwing money at the problem. Private chefs to make sure the boys ate well, top-tier tutors to keep them on track academically, a rotating cast of nannies to provide supervision. But supervision wasn't love, structure wasn't presence, and no amount of money could replace what Lena had given them, her heart. Adam finally understood what Maya had been trying to tell him. His sons didn't need another employee, they needed a parent. And right now, Adam was too broken to be that person. But maybe, just maybe, Maya could help him learn how. He picked up the phone and called Carmen. Hire her, he said simply. Whatever she's asking, double it. I don't care. Just make sure she stays. Carmen smiled on the other end of the line. Already done, boss. She starts tomorrow. The first few days of Maya's tenure were revelatory for Adam in ways he hadn't anticipated. He started coming home earlier, not because anyone asked him to, but because he was curious. What was this woman doing that had transformed his war zone into something resembling a home? One evening, he arrived just as Maya was teaching the boys how to make homemade pizza. Flour everywhere, sauce splattered on the counters, 3 giggling kids covered head to toe in toppings. It was chaos, but it was joyful chaos. Adam stood in the doorway, mesmerized. They're having fun, he thought, as if seeing his children for the first time. When the boys noticed him, instead of retreating to their rooms like they usually did, Eli ran over and grabbed his hand. Dad, come help us. Maya says you can put whatever you want on your pizza, even pineapple. Adam looked at Maya, who simply smiled and nodded toward the counter. There's an apron with your name on it, Mr. Wexler. And just like that, he found himself elbow-deep in dough, laughing as Ben tried to stack 17 pepperonis on a single slice. It wasn't a business meeting. It wasn't a strategy session. It was just a father being present with his sons, and it felt like breathing for the first time in 6 months. Small moments like this can rewire your entire perspective, can't they? Sometimes the answers aren't complicated. They're just quieter than we expect. But not everything was smooth. Adam's blind spot wasn't just emotional, it was also practical. He'd spent so much time delegating every aspect of parenting that he genuinely didn't know how to connect with his sons on a basic level. One night, after Maya had put the boys to bed, she found Adam sitting in the living room, staring blankly at his laptop. "How was your day?" she asked, sitting across from him. Adam sighed. Busy. 3 board meetings, a product demo, and a lawsuit that's going nowhere. Maya nodded. And the boys? How was their day? Adam paused. He genuinely didn't know. I assume they had a good day. They seemed happy at dinner. Maya's expression softened, but her words were direct. Adam, you're one of the smartest men I've ever met, but you can't delegate fatherhood. Your sons don't care about your board meetings or your lawsuits. They care about whether you notice when Ben draws you a picture, whether you remember that Noah loves dinosaurs, whether you ask Eli about the nightmare he had last night. Adam felt shame wash over him. I didn't know he had a nightmare. I know, Maya said gently. But you can learn. You're not a bad father, Adam. You're just a father who forgot how to be present. And the good news? You can start right now. That conversation became a turning point. Adam began keeping a journal where he wrote down small details about each boy, their favorite colors, their fears, the things that made them laugh. It felt silly at first, like homework, but slowly it started to shift something in him. He wasn't just managing a household anymore. He was building a relationship, and that required something money couldn't buy: attention. The corporate world began to notice Adam's shift. He started declining evening meetings. He blocked off mornings for school drop-offs. He even, shockingly, turned down a keynote speech at a major tech conference because it fell on Eli's birthday. His board members were concerned. Adam, are you okay? You're not yourself lately, one investor commented during a Zoom call. Adam looked directly into the camera and said something he never thought he'd say. Actually, I'm more myself than I've been in a long time. My family needs me. And for once, I'm choosing them over the business. The investor blinked, clearly taken aback, but Adam didn't care. For years, he had built his identity around being a titan of industry. But titans are lonely. And when Lena died, he realized that success without connection is just expensive emptiness. Maya had shown him that, not through lectures or judgments, but through example. Every day, she chose presence over perfection. She chose connection over control. And slowly, Adam was learning to do the same. The truth was beginning to win over the shadows of his old life, and it felt like coming home to himself. Isn't it interesting how sometimes the most successful people are the loneliest? Makes you wonder what we're really chasing when we prioritize achievement over presence. By the end of Maya's second week, something extraordinary had happened. Adam and his sons had dinner together every single night. No phones, no laptops, just conversation. At first, it was awkward. The boys didn't trust it. Why are you here? Noah asked suspiciously during the first family dinner. Don't you have work? Adam smiled sadly. I do, but this is more important. Ben looked up from his plate, eyes wide. More important than work. Way more important, Adam confirmed, reaching over to ruffle his son's hair. That small gesture, so simple, so human, was the beginning of something new. The boys started seeking him out. Eli would ask him to read bedtime stories. Noah would show him drawings. Ben would crawl into his lap during movie nights. These weren't grand gestures. They were tiny threads, slowly weaving a family back together. And Maya, she watched from the sidelines, quietly proud, knowing that her real job wasn't to replace Lena. It was to help this family remember how to love each other again. The revenge of grief might be isolation, but the truth, the real, unshakable truth, is that love always finds a way back. Even in the darkest shadows, even when you think it's gone forever. Love is patient. Love is persistent. And love, when given the chance, always conquers the darkness. Adam sat on the edge of his bed that night, looking at a photo album he hadn't opened since the funeral. Pictures of Lena, laughing at their wedding. Lena, pregnant with the triplets, glowing with joy. Lena, holding their newborn sons for the first time, tears streaming down her face. He let himself cry, really cry, for the first time in 6 months. And when he was done, he didn't feel weaker. He felt lighter, Because Maya had been right all along. Grief isn't the enemy. Avoidance is. And the only way through the pain is straight through the middle of it, with people who love you holding your hand. Adam finally understood what his sons needed. They didn't need a perfect father. They needed an honest one. And starting tomorrow, that's exactly who he would be. If you've been holding back tears, holding back truth, holding back connection because you think strength means silence, this is your reminder that real strength is showing up, even when you're broken, especially when you're broken. Because that's when love does its deepest work. So let this story move through you. Let it remind you of what matters. And pass it on to someone who might need that same reminder. Truth always wins. Love always conquers. And second chances, they're real. Maya Coleman's story didn't start at Ravenshill Estate. It started 30 years earlier in a cramped hospital room in Baltimore, where a teenage mother gave birth and disappeared 3 days later, leaving nothing behind but a handwritten note that said, "I'm sorry. I can't." The nurses named the baby Maya, a name that means illusion in Sanskrit, though none of them knew that at the time. It was just a pretty name for a baby nobody wanted. And for the first 8 years of her life, Maya lived up to that meaning. She was passed from foster home to foster home, always the illusion of belonging but never the reality. Some homes were kind but overwhelmed. Others were cold and transactional. A few were outright cruel. By the time Maya turned 10, she had lived in 14 different houses and learned a truth that most children never have to face. Love, for some people, is conditional. Temporary, breakable, but instead of hardening her heart, those years did something unexpected. They opened it wider. Because Maya understood something that hurt people often forget. Pain doesn't have to make you cruel. Sometimes, if you're brave enough, it can make you kind. The turning point came when Maya was 12. She was placed with a woman named Mrs. Lorraine Patterson, a retired schoolteacher who fostered older kids that the system had labeled difficult. Maya had just been expelled from her previous home for defiant behavior, which really meant she had cried too much, asked too many questions, and refused to pretend everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. Mrs. Patterson took one look at Maya's file, set it aside, and said, "I don't care what that paper says. You're not difficult, you're just honest. And honest kids scare people because they hold up mirrors." That sentence changed everything. For the first time in her life, Maya wasn't being punished for feeling. She was being celebrated for it. Mrs. Patterson didn't try to fix Maya. She just gave her space to be broken, to heal at her own pace, to learn that vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was courage. They spent 3 years together before Mrs. Patterson passed away from cancer. And in those 3 years, Maya learned the most important lesson of her life. The people who don't run from your pain are the ones worth keeping. And when you become that person for someone else, that's when you find your purpose. Ever wonder who stayed with you when you were at your worst? Those are your people. And if you haven't found them yet, maybe it's time to become that person for someone else. After Mrs. Patterson died, Maya aged out of the foster system at 18 with no family, no safety net, and no clear path forward. Most kids in her position ended up homeless, incarcerated, or trapped in cycles of poverty and trauma. But Maya had something they didn't, a promise. On her deathbed, Mrs. Patterson had squeezed Maya's hand and whispered, "Don't let your pain be wasted, sweetheart. Use it. Turn it into something that helps others." So Maya did. She worked 3 jobs, waitressing at a diner, cleaning offices at night, and volunteering at a youth shelter on weekends. She slept 4 hours a night and ate ramen noodles for dinner 6 days a week. But she showed up. Every single day, she showed up. At the shelter, she met kids who reminded her of herself, angry, scared, convinced the world had given up on them. And Maya became for them what Mrs. Patterson had been for her, a mirror that reflected their worth instead of their wounds. She didn't have a psychology degree or fancy training. She just had lived experience and a stubborn refusal to give up on people the way others had given up on her. And it worked. Kids who had been written off as lost causes started opening up, healing, rebuilding. Because Maya didn't see them as problems to solve, she saw them as people worth fighting for. By the time Maya was 25, she had become a legend in Baltimore's social services community. Organizations would call her when they had a kid nobody else could reach. Schools would bring her in to mediate conflicts that had turned violent. She wasn't formally trained, but she had something more valuable than credentials. She had credibility. When she told a kid, "I know what it's like to feel invisible," they believed her because she'd lived it. When she said, "Your anger makes sense," they didn't feel judged. They felt seen. And that's the thing about trauma-informed care. It's not about having the right answers. It's about asking the right questions and staying present for whatever comes up. Maya had mastered that art through years of trial and error, heartbreak and breakthrough. She knew that healing wasn't linear. She knew that trust took time. And she knew that the kids who pushed hardest were usually the ones who needed love the most. This wasn't theoretical for Maya. This was survival. And every time she helped a kid find their way out of the darkness, she was also healing that 12-year-old version of herself who thought she'd never be enough. Think about the people who shaped you most. Chances are they weren't perfect. They were just present, and sometimes that's all it takes to change a life. But working in crisis intervention took a toll. By the time Maya turned 28, she was burned out. She had poured so much into others that she had nothing left for herself. She was living in a studio apartment with no heat, surviving on coffee and crackers, and waking up in the middle of the night with panic attacks. Her body was screaming for rest, but her heart wouldn't let her stop, because stopping felt like giving up. And Maya Coleman didn't give up, ever. That's when her mentor, Dr. Claudia Reeves, a psychologist who had been supervising Maya's work at the shelter, sat her down and said something that probably saved her life. "Maya, you can't pour from an empty cup. You've been running on fumes for years, and if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to crash, and then you won't be able to help anyone." Maya resisted at first. "But the kids need me," she argued. Dr. Reeves smiled sadly. "They need you whole, not broken. Take a sabbatical, rest, heal, and when you're ready, come back stronger." It was the hardest decision Maya had ever made. But she took 6 months off, moved to a quiet town in Oregon, and did something she hadn't done since childhood. She let herself just exist. No mission, no rescuing, just being. During those 6 months in Oregon, Maya rediscovered herself. She hiked in the mountains, read novels by the river, and started journaling every morning. She attended a local support group for former foster youth and realized she wasn't alone in her struggles. She started therapy for the first time in her life and unpacked trauma she didn't even know she'd been carrying. And slowly, piece by piece, she rebuilt her foundation. She learned that self-care wasn't selfish. It was essential. She learned that boundaries weren't barriers. They were bridges to healthier relationships. And she learned that her worth wasn't tied to how much she could give others. She had value just by existing. When the 6 months ended, Maya felt ready to return to her work, but not in the same way. She wanted something different, a role where she could make a deep impact on a few lives rather than spreading herself thin across dozens. That's when she saw the ad for a live-in caregiver position in Portland. Family in Crisis seeks compassionate, unconventional caregiver for 3 young boys. Must be patient, creative, and unafraid of chaos. It was the last line that hooked her. This isn't a job, it's a calling. Maya applied that same day. And when she walked into Ravenshill Estate for the first time, she knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Sometimes the universe doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you need. And Maya? She needed this family just as much as they needed her. The first week at Ravenshill was brutal, even for someone as experienced as Maya. The boys tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Eli would ignore her completely, pretending she didn't exist. Noah would sabotage everything she tried to do, knocking over games, hiding toys, refusing to cooperate. And Ben, sweet, sensitive Ben, would cry inconsolably for hours, calling for his mother in a way that broke Maya's heart into pieces. There were moments, quiet, desperate moments at 2 a.m. when all three boys were screaming and nothing she did seemed to help, when Maya questioned whether she was the right person for this. But then she would remember Mrs. Patterson's words, "Don't let your pain be wasted," and she would take a deep breath, wipe her tears, and go back into the war zone, because that's what love does. It shows up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And the truth, the brutal, beautiful truth, is that the kids who push you away the hardest are the ones testing whether you'll stay. They're not trying to be difficult. They're trying to protect themselves from another loss. And Maya, she understood that better than anyone. So she stayed. She showed up every single morning with the same calm presence, the same gentle patience, the same unshakable belief that these boys were worth fighting for. And slowly, brick by brick, she dismantled the walls they had built around their hearts. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks into Maya's tenure. The boys were having a particularly rough day, fighting with each other, refusing to eat, throwing tantrums over nothing. Maya had tried everything: distraction, redirection, humor. Nothing worked, so she did something radical. She sat down on the floor in the middle of the chaos and started crying. Not loud, theatrical crying, just quiet, honest tears. The boys froze. They had never seen an adult cry before, not like this. Eli approached cautiously. "Why are you sad?" he asked, his voice small. Maya looked up at him, her eyes red but steady. "Because I miss someone I love, and sometimes missing hurts so much that you just have to let it out." Ben crawled into her lap without a word. Noah sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. And Eli, after a long moment, knelt down and put his small hand on her shoulder. "We miss our mum too," he whispered. And just like that, everything shifted. They weren't caregiver and charges anymore. They were 4 people who understood loss, sitting together in the wreckage, holding space for each other's grief. That moment became the foundation for everything that followed. Because Maya had done something revolutionary, she had been vulnerable first. She had shown them that it was okay to fall apart, that tears weren't weaknesses, that grief was just love with nowhere to go. And in doing so, she gave them permission to feel, have you ever been brave enough to let someone see your pain? That's where real connection lives, not in the polished versions of ourselves, but in the messy, honest, broken parts. From that day forward, things changed at Ravenshill Estate. The boys started talking about Lena openly, sharing memories, asking questions, crying when they needed to. Maya never tried to replace her. She honored Lena's memory by keeping her present in their daily lives. They created a memory wall in the boys' room with photos and drawings. They visited Lena's favorite park every Sunday. They cooked her recipes and listened to her favorite songs, and through it all, Maya taught them the most important lesson of her life. Loss doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying someone with you in a new way. The boys absorbed this like oxygen, and as they healed, they began to bloom. Eli's walls came down, revealing a thoughtful, creative boy who loved building things with his hands. Noah's rebellion transformed into leadership. He became the protector of his brothers, fierce and loyal. And Ben, once so fragile, found his voice. He started expressing his feelings through art and music, creating beauty from his pain. Maya watched it all with quiet pride, knowing that she hadn't fixed them. She had just given them space to fix themselves. And that was the greatest gift she could offer. Because healing isn't something you do to someone. It's something you do with them, and the people who understand that, who sit in the mess with you instead of trying to clean it up, those are the people who change your life forever. As the weeks turned into months, Maya realized something profound. She hadn't just found a job at Ravenshill Estate. She had found a family. For the first time in 30 years, she had a place where she belonged, not as a temporary guest, but as an essential part of something bigger than herself. The boys had given her something she'd been searching for her entire life, a home. Not a building, but a feeling, a sense that she mattered, that her presence made a difference, that she was loved not for what she did, but for who she was. And Adam, he had become a friend, a partner in the sacred work of rebuilding this family. They would sit on the porch after the boys went to bed, talking about progress and setbacks, sharing stories and strategies. He had started calling her by her first name instead of Miss Coleman, a small shift that signaled a deeper respect. They were in this together now, co-pilots on a journey neither had expected, but both were committed to finishing. The revenge of isolation might be bitterness, but the truth, the undeniable truth, is that connection heals all wounds. And Maya, the woman who didn't run, had finally found people who wouldn't run from her either. If this story is stirring something in you, a memory, a regret, a hope, don't ignore it, share it. Let someone else know they're not alone in their struggle, because that's how we break cycles. That's how we build communities. That's how we prove that truth always conquers shadows, one brave conversation at a time. The scandal broke on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after Maya's arrival at Ravenshill Estate. Adam was in his home office reviewing quarterly projections when Carmen burst through the door, her face pale and her phone clutched in her trembling hand. "We have a problem," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "A big one." She turned her phone toward him, and Adam's blood ran cold. The headline on Portland's largest news site screamed in bold letters, "Billionaire's demon children. 3 nannies speak out about nightmare at Wexler Estate." Below it, a video thumbnail showed 3 women, former caregivers who had quit within days, sitting on a pristine television studio couch, their expressions rehearsed and somber. Adam's hands shook as he clicked play. What he saw and heard over the next 8 minutes felt like watching his family get destroyed in real time. The nannies painted a picture of absolute chaos, violent tantrums, destroyed property, psychological manipulation, and, most damaging, complete neglect from Adam himself. "He was never home," one woman said, dabbing fake tears from her eyes. Those poor boys were basically raising themselves while their father chased another billion. The worst part, some of it was true, and the parts that weren't true were just twisted enough to sound believable. Within an hour, the story had gone viral. Local news picked it up. National outlets started calling. Social media exploded with hot takes and judgment. Wexler Kids was trending on Twitter, with strangers from around the world weighing in on a family they knew nothing about. "Those children need to be removed from that home," one tweet declared, with 15,000 likes. "Money can't buy good parenting," another sneered. "Typical rich narcissist, builds an empire but can't love his own kids," a particularly cruel comment read. Adam scrolled through the chaos, each word landing like a physical blow. He'd spent his entire adult life building a reputation as a visionary, a leader, someone who solved impossible problems. And now, in a matter of hours, that reputation was being incinerated by 3 bitter women and an internet mob that had never met his sons. The truth was being devoured by shadows, lies that sounded just plausible enough to stick. And the worst part, he had no idea how to fight back, because some of their accusations, the ones about his absence and emotional distance, weren't lies at all. They were just painful, public truths he hadn't been ready to face. Have you ever had your worst failures broadcast for the world to judge? It's a special kind of hell, one that makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. The boys found out in the worst possible way. Noah was scrolling through Eli's iPad during breakfast when he stumbled onto a YouTube video titled "The Truth About the Wexler Triplets. Are They Really Monsters?" He clicked it before Maya could stop him, and within seconds, all 3 boys were watching strangers dissect their lives like a true crime documentary. "These kids are out of control," a YouTuber said, his voice dripping with judgment. 3 nannies have come forward with horror stories about violence, manipulation, and complete chaos. And where's the father in all this? Probably on a yacht somewhere, counting his money. The boys' faces went through a devastating progression of emotions. Confusion, then recognition, then shame. Ben started crying immediately. Eli's jaw clenched, his fists balling at his sides. Noah just stared at the screen, his expression blank, like he was watching his own execution. Maya moved quickly, shutting off the iPad and pulling all 3 boys into her arms. "Stop!" she said firmly, her voice cutting through their shock. "Whatever those people are saying, it's not true. They don't know you. They don't know your hearts. They don't know anything." But Eli pulled away. His eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. "They called us monsters," he whispered. "Are we monsters, Maya? Is that why everyone leaves?" And just like that, all the progress they'd made, all the healing, all the trust, felt like it was crumbling in real time. Maya's first instinct was to shield the boys from everything. Turn off the internet, block the news, pretend the world outside their home didn't exist. But she knew from her years working with traumatized kids that avoidance never works. Pain ignored doesn't disappear. It just goes underground and festers. So instead, she made a radical choice. She met it head on. "Listen to me," she said, kneeling at their level, making sure each boy could see her eyes. "Yes, people are saying mean things about you right now. And yes, some of those people used to work here, but here's what they don't understand. You're not bad kids, you're hurt kids. And hurt kids sometimes do things that look scary on the outside because they're screaming for help on the inside. Those women, they didn't stick around long enough to see who you really are. They saw your pain and they ran, but I'm not running. Your dad's not running. And anyone who truly loves you won't run either." Ben looked up at her, his face streaked with tears. "But what if they take us away? What if they say Dad can't take care of us?" Maya's heart broke at the question, but she kept her voice steady. "No one is taking you anywhere. You're safe, you're loved, and we're going to get through this together, not by hiding from it, but by facing it." Noah, still staring at the floor, asked quietly, "How do we face it when everyone thinks we're bad?" Maya smiled sadly. "We show them the truth, not by arguing or defending, but by becoming the best versions of ourselves. That's how truth wins, boys. It just keeps showing up every single day until the shadows can't hide it anymore." It's funny how the hardest moments often teach us the most important lessons, isn't it? Makes you wonder what battles you're facing right now that might actually be preparing you for something greater. While Maya was managing the emotional fallout with the boys, Adam was dealing with the professional catastrophe. His board of directors called an emergency meeting. His investors wanted reassurances that his personal issues wouldn't impact the company. His PR team was scrambling to draft statements, schedule interviews, and control the narrative before it spiraled further. But Adam, for the first time in his career, didn't care about any of it. His sons were hurting. His family was under attack, and no amount of damage control could fix that. So he did something unprecedented. He cancelled everything. "Sir, you can't just cancel the board meeting," his COO protested. "The investors are furious. They're threatening to—" "I don't care," Adam interrupted, his voice ice cold. "My kids just watched strangers call them monsters on national television. Everything else can wait." He hung up, walked out of his office, and went straight to the boys' room, where Maya had gathered them for what she called an emergency family meeting. When Adam walked in, all 3 boys looked up at him with expressions that gutted him: fear, shame, and a desperate hope that he wouldn't abandon them too. Adam sat down on the floor with them, something he never would have done 3 weeks ago, and took a deep breath. "I need to say something, and I need you to really hear me. Okay?" The boys nodded. "Those people on TV, they're wrong. You're not monsters. You're not demons. You're my sons, and I love you more than anything in this world. I know I haven't always shown that. I know I've been distant and distracted and more focused on work than on you, but that changes now. Starting today, We fight this together as a family." The response from the boys was immediate and overwhelming. Eli, who had been holding back tears, finally let them fall. Noah buried his face in Adam's shoulder, and Ben climbed into his father's lap, clutching him like a lifeline. For several minutes, they just sat there, four people who had been broken by grief, now holding each other together in the face of public humiliation. Maya watched from the corner of the room, her own eyes wet, knowing that this moment, this raw, unfiltered display of vulnerability, was exactly what this family needed. Not a PR strategy or a legal defense, but honest, messy, unconditional love. After a while, Eli pulled back and asked the question that had been haunting all of them. "Dad, what do we do now?" Adam looked at Maya, who nodded encouragingly, then back at his sons. "We tell our truth, not to the media or the trolls online, but to the people who matter. We rebuild our life, one day at a time, and we prove through our actions that we're not what they say we are. And if people still want to judge us after that, that's their problem, not ours." It was the most honest thing Adam had said in months, and the boys felt it. They didn't need their father to be perfect. They just needed him to be real. And in that moment, Adam Wexler, billionaire, CEO, tech visionary, finally understood that his greatest achievement wouldn't be building a company. It would be rebuilding his family. Think about the moments that defined your relationships. Were they the perfect ones, or the broken ones where someone showed up anyway? That's where real love lives, in the showing up. The next few days were brutal. The media circus intensified. Paparazzi camped outside the estate, hoping to catch a photo of the demon children. Internet sleuths dug through Adam's past, looking for more ammunition. Former business rivals used the scandal as an opportunity to attack Wexler Tech's credibility. It felt like the entire world was against them. But inside Ravenshill Estate, something unexpected was happening. The family was getting stronger. Maya created what she called truth circles every evening, where each person could share how they were feeling without judgment. Adam started taking mornings off to have breakfast with the boys. The triplets began journaling their emotions instead of acting them out. They weren't perfect. There were still meltdowns, still moments of despair, but they were together, and that made all the difference. One evening, as Maya was putting the boys to bed, Ben asked her a question that stopped her in her tracks. "Maya, why didn't you leave when the bad stuff started?" She sat on the edge of his bed, thinking carefully about her answer. "Because, buddy, real love doesn't leave when things get hard. Real love stays. It fights. It believes in people even when they can't believe in themselves. And you three, you're worth fighting for." Ben smiled, a small but genuine expression that lit up his whole face. "You're worth fighting for too, Maya." And in that moment, Maya realized something profound. She hadn't just been healing these boys. They had been healing her too. The turning point came 2 weeks after the scandal broke. Dr. Louise Monroe from Child Protective Services arrived at Ravenshill Estate for an unannounced inspection, following multiple reports from concerned citizens who had seen the news coverage. Adam's stomach dropped when Carmen informed him of her arrival. This was it, the moment that could tear his family apart forever. But Maya, calm as ever, simply smiled and said, "Let her in. We have nothing to hide." Dr. Monroe was a stern woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a reputation for being impossible to fool. She had seen every trick in the book: parents who performed for inspections, children who had been coached to lie, homes that looked perfect on the surface but were nightmares behind closed doors. She expected Ravenshill to be the same, a wealthy family using money and lawyers to cover up neglect and dysfunction. What she found instead shocked her to her core. The boys weren't performing. They were just being themselves, laughing, playing, occasionally bickering the way normal siblings do. The house wasn't sterile and staged. It was lived in and warm, with children's artwork on the walls and toys scattered in organized chaos. And Maya, she wasn't a hired actor reading from a script. She was genuinely, deeply connected to these children in a way Dr. Monroe had rarely seen in her 20-year career. During her interviews with the boys, Dr. Monroe asked pointed questions designed to reveal the truth. "Do you feel safe here?" she asked Eli. "Yeah," he said without hesitation. "Maya and Dad make sure we're okay." "What happens when you get in trouble?" she asked Noah. "Maya talks to us," he explained. "She doesn't yell. She asks us why we did something and helps us figure out better choices." "Do you like living here?" she asked Ben. He looked at her like it was the strangest question in the world. "This is my home," he said simply. "Why would I want to be anywhere else?" Dr. Monroe took extensive notes, inspected every room, reviewed schedules and routines, and observed family interactions for 6 hours. By the end of the day, her initial skepticism had completely dissolved. She found Adam in the living room and delivered her verdict. "Mr. Wexler, I came here expecting to find a disaster. What I found instead is a family that's healing. Your boys are well cared for, emotionally supported, and clearly loved. Whatever those women told the media, it's not reflective of what's happening in this home now. I'll be filing a report that recommends no further action." Adam felt like he could breathe for the first time in weeks. "Thank you," he managed to say. "Don't thank me, Doctor." Monroe replied, glancing at Maya, who was helping the boys with a puzzle in the corner. "Thank her. That woman is a miracle worker. Don't let her go." Adam smiled. "I don't plan to. When people show up for you in your darkest hour, that's when you know who really matters. And sometimes the truth doesn't need to shout to win. It just needs to quietly exist until the shadows can't deny it anymore." That night, after Dr. Monroe left and the boys were asleep, Adam and Maya sat on the back porch, exhausted but relieved. "We survived," Adam said, staring out at the darkened garden. "We did more than survive," Maya corrected gently. "We showed the world who we really are, and the people who matter, they saw it." Adam turned to her, his expression serious. "Maya, I need you to know something. You didn't just save my sons. You saved me. Before you came here, I was drowning. I didn't know how to be a father, how to show up, how to love them the way they needed. You taught me all of that, and I will never be able to repay you for that." Maya shook her head, smiling softly. "You don't need to repay me, Adam. You just need to keep showing up. For them, for yourself. That's all any of us can do. Keep showing up, even when it's hard, even when the world is watching, even when we're scared. That's how we prove that truth always conquers shadows. We just keep living it, one honest day at a time." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two people who had been strangers a month ago and were now partners in the most important work either of them had ever done. The scandal would fade eventually. The headlines would move on to the next crisis, but what they had built here, this fragile, beautiful, hard-won family that would last forever. And isn't that the whole point? Not to avoid the storms, but to learn how to stand together when they come. If this story has reminded you of what really matters, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone, that healing is possible, that love, real, messy, inconvenient love, always wins in the end. The weeks following Dr. Monroe's inspection should have brought relief. The official report had cleared the Wexler family of any wrongdoing, stating that the home environment was stable, nurturing, and conducive to the children's well-being. But the court of public opinion is rarely swayed by facts. Online forums continued to dissect every detail of the family's life. Anonymous tipsters called CPS Weekly with fabricated concerns. Photographers with telephoto lenses lurked near the estate's perimeter, hoping to catch a moment that could be twisted into a scandalous narrative. The family wasn't just healing anymore, they were healing under a microscope. Every grocery store trip, every playground visit, every moment outside the safety of Ravenshill's walls came with the risk of being photographed, judged, and misrepresented. It was suffocating. But Maya had learned long ago that growth rarely happens in comfort. Sometimes the pressure that threatens to break you is actually the force that makes you stronger. And this family, They were about to discover just how resilient they really were. The truth was being tested by shadows that refused to fade quietly, but truth, real truth, doesn't need perfect conditions to thrive. It just needs people brave enough to keep living it. Maya's approach to the ongoing scrutiny was both practical and philosophical. She refused to let the boys hide from the world, but she also refused to let the world define them. "We're going to keep living our lives," she told Adam one morning as they prepared for the boys' first public outing since the scandal, a trip to the Portland Children's Museum. Not defiantly, not apologetically, just normally. Because that's what healing looks like. It's boring and consistent and unglamorous, and the people watching, they'll either get tired of the lack of drama, or they'll finally see what we've known all along. These are just regular kids who needed love and got it. Adam nodded, though his anxiety was palpable. What if someone confronts us? What if the boys get upset? Maya placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Then we handle it together, but we don't let fear keep us locked in this house. That's not living, Adam. That's surviving. And these boys deserve more than survival. So they went. The museum trip was carefully planned. Arrive early to avoid crowds, stick to quieter exhibits, have an exit strategy if things got overwhelming. But Maya also built in flexibility, because rigid plans often create more anxiety than they prevent. She packed snacks, comfort items, and a mindset of gentle adaptability. Have you ever noticed that the moments we worry about most rarely go the way we imagine? Sometimes they're worse, sometimes they're better, but they're almost never exactly what we feared. The museum visit started beautifully. The boys were excited, well-behaved, genuinely engaged with the exhibits. Eli was fascinated by the physics demonstrations, carefully studying how pulleys and levers worked. Noah led his brothers through the water play area like an expedition leader, building elaborate dam systems and channels. Ben lost himself in the art studio, painting a rainbow that he insisted was for Maya because she makes everything colorful. Adam walked beside them, his hand resting protectively on Ben's shoulder, his eyes bright with something that looked suspiciously like joy. For 2 glorious hours, they were just a normal family doing normal things. But then, in the crowded cafe during lunch, everything shifted. A woman in her 40s approached their table, her phone already recording. "Are you Adam Wexler?" she asked loudly, making sure nearby families could hear. Adam's body tensed, but he kept his voice even. "I am. Can I help you?" The woman's expression was a mix of self-righteousness and cruelty. "I just want to know how you sleep at night. Raising those poor children in such a toxic environment. I know what you did." The cafe went silent. Everyone was watching now. The boys froze, their sandwiches halfway to their mouths. Adam felt rage and shame warring in his chest. But before he could respond, Maya stood up calmly and positioned herself between the woman and the children. "Ma'am," Maya said, her voice quiet but carrying a steel that made everyone lean in to hear, "you don't know these children. You don't know this family. You watched a few minutes of edited footage designed to generate clicks and outrage, and you decided that made you an expert on their lives. But here's what I know. These boys have shown more courage, more resilience, and more heart in the past 2 months than most people show in a lifetime. They've lost their mother. They've been publicly humiliated. And they're still here, still trying, still choosing to heal instead of staying broken. So before you record another second of this family's private moment, ask yourself, what are you really accomplishing? Because from where I'm standing, all you're doing is bullying children who have already been through hell. Is that really who you want to be?" The woman's face flushed red. A few people in the cafe started nodding in agreement with Maya. Someone said, "Leave them alone." Another person added, "You should be ashamed." The woman lowered her phone, muttered something defensive, and hurried out of the cafe. The moment she left, the energy in the room shifted. A young mother at the next table leaned over and said, "You're doing a beautiful job with those boys. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." An elderly man gave Adam a thumbs up. A teenager working behind the counter brought over free cookies for the triplets. It wasn't a mob of supporters or a viral moment of vindication. It was just quiet, human decency, pushing back against cruelty. And for the boys, it was a revelation. Not everyone believed the lies. Not everyone was against them. Some people actually saw their truth without needing proof or explanations. On the drive home, the boys were unusually quiet, processing what had happened. Finally, Noah spoke up from the back seat. "Maya, were you scared?" Maya glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "A little, but more than scared, I was angry. Nobody gets to treat you guys like that. Nobody." Eli, always the thinker, asked, "Why do people believe bad things about us so easily?" It was the kind of question that didn't have a simple answer, but Maya tried. "Because, buddy, people like stories that make them feel something. Drama is more interesting than normal life, and sometimes people who are unhappy with their own lives feel better when they can judge someone else. It's not fair, and it's not right, but it's human nature. The good news, it's also human nature to love truth when you really see it. Those people in the cafe today, they saw you, the real you, and they chose to stand with you." Ben, who had been clutching his rainbow painting the entire ride, said softly, "I'm glad you were there, Maya." "Me too, buddy," she replied, her throat tight with emotion. "Me too." Adam, driving in thoughtful silence, realized something profound. Maya hadn't just defended his sons. She had modeled for them how to stand up for themselves with grace and strength. She had shown them that you could face cruelty without becoming cruel, that you could set boundaries without being aggressive, that dignity was a choice you made every single day. These weren't lessons you could teach in a classroom. These were life skills learned in real time, in uncomfortable moments, with someone who loved you standing beside you. And that was priceless. Ever had someone fight for you when you couldn't fight for yourself? That's when you realize love isn't just a feeling, it's an action. The incident at the museum became a turning point in how the family approached public life. They stopped hiding, but they also stopped performing. They went to the park, the library, the grocery store, not to prove anything to anyone, but simply to live. And something interesting happened. The more normally they behaved, the less interesting they became to the people watching. Photographers stopped showing up because there were no dramatic scenes to capture. Online gossip forums moved on to newer scandals. The Wexler family went from viral sensation to boring news in a matter of weeks, which was exactly what they needed. Healing doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in the quiet, unglamorous routines of daily life. Morning pancakes, bedtime stories, homework help, scraped knees and soccer practice. These were the moments that rewrote the boys' story. Not grand gestures or public vindication, but consistent, loving presence. Maya understood this instinctively. She created rituals that gave the boys stability, gratitude mornings, where they each shared something they were thankful for, memory Mondays, where they told stories about Lena, feelings check-ins before bed where emotions were named and honored. None of it was revolutionary. It was just intentional, loving structure. And for children who had experienced chaos and loss, that structure was everything. Adam, meanwhile, was learning to be a participant in his sons' lives rather than just a provider. He started coaching Eli through building projects, helping him construct elaborate Lego cities and explaining the engineering principles behind them. He took Noah to basketball games, teaching him stats and strategy, bonding over shared competitive spirits. He sat with Ben in the art studio Maya had set up in the sunroom, painting side by side in comfortable silence. These weren't activities Adam had naturally gravitated toward. Sports and art and building toys had always seemed like wastes of time when there were business problems to solve. But he was discovering that time spent with his sons wasn't wasted. It was invested. Every laugh shared, every story told, every hug given was a deposit in the emotional bank account that would carry them through future struggles. Maya watched this transformation with quiet satisfaction. She hadn't changed Adam by lecturing or criticizing. She had simply modeled a different way of being, and he had been humble enough to learn. That's what real leadership looks like, not demanding change, but inspiring it. Not pointing out flaws, but illuminating possibilities. Adam was becoming the father his sons needed, not because he was forced to, but because he finally understood what they needed from him. His presence, his attention, his imperfect but genuine love. The truth of what family really meant was conquering the shadows of his old priorities, and it was beautiful to watch. Think about the people in your life who've changed you without trying. They didn't push. They just shone so brightly you wanted to step into their light. That's transformational love. One evening, about 6 weeks after Dr. Monroe's inspection, something remarkable happened. The boys were in the living room, building a blanket fort, when Eli suddenly stopped and looked at Maya with an expression of deep seriousness. "Maya, I need to tell you something." Maya set down the book she'd been reading and gave him her full attention. "I'm listening." Eli took a deep breath. "I'm sorry we were so mean to you when you first got here. We thought if we were bad enough, you'd leave like everyone else. But you didn't leave, and now I don't know what we'd do without you." Maya felt tears prick her eyes, but she kept her voice steady. "Eli, you don't need to apologize. You were protecting yourself. That's not mean, that's survival. But I want you to know something. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me, buddy." Noah chimed in from inside the fort. "Even if we mess up again." "Even then," Maya confirmed. Ben poked his head out, his face earnest. "Even if we're not perfect." "Especially then," Maya said, pulling all 3 boys into a hug, "because perfect is boring. And I like you exactly as you are. Messy, loud, complicated, and absolutely wonderful." Adam, watching from the doorway, felt something crack open in his chest. This was what he'd been too broken to give his sons after Lena died, the assurance that they were loved not despite their flaws, but including them. Maya had given them that gift, and in doing so, she had given it to him too. He was allowed to be imperfect. He was allowed to make mistakes. He was allowed to be human, and he was still worthy of love. That realization was revolutionary. The next few weeks unfolded with a gentleness that felt almost surreal after months of chaos. The family established rhythms and traditions: Friday movie nights with homemade popcorn, Saturday morning farmers market trips, Sunday family dinners where everyone cooked something, even if Ben's contribution was just stirring the salad dressing. They visited Lena's grave together, bringing flowers and telling her about their lives, teaching the boys that death didn't end relationship, it just changed the form. They invited Carmen over for dinner, and she became an unofficial aunt, bringing board games and terrible jokes that made the boys groan and laugh in equal measure. They were, by any measure, becoming a real family. Not perfect, not without struggles, but real, and that authenticity was the foundation for everything else. Dr. Monroe did a follow-up visit 8 weeks after her initial inspection and was stunned by the transformation. "Mr. Wexler, I've been doing this job for 2 decades, and I've never seen a turnaround like this. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Adam smiled. "I can't take credit. Maya's the architect of this transformation." Dr. Monroe looked at Maya with something close to reverence. "Have you ever considered getting formal credentials? With your natural talent and real-world experience, you could help so many more families." Maya shook her head gently. "I appreciate that, Dr. Monroe, but I'm exactly where I need to be. These boys are my calling. This family is my purpose. Some people are meant to help hundreds. I'm meant to pour everything into a few. And that's enough for me." That night, after the boys were asleep and the house was quiet, Adam found Maya on the back porch, her usual spot for reflection. He sat beside her, 2 cups of tea in his hands, and offered her one. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything, for seeing us when no one else would, for staying when everyone else left, for teaching me how to be the father my sons deserve." Maya smiled, accepting the tea. "You're giving me too much credit, Adam. You did the hard work. I just held up a mirror." "No," Adam said firmly. "You did more than that. You showed us what love looks like when it's not conditional, not transactional, not performative, just real, and that changed everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the Portland sky. Two people who had been strangers 3 months ago and were now family, not by blood, but by choice, by showing up, by refusing to let shadows win. The truth had conquered, not through dramatic battles or public vindication, but through quiet, consistent, unglamorous love. And that truth, it was unshakable. If you've ever doubted whether small acts of kindness matter, let this be your reminder. They're not small, they're everything. They're how we change the world, one brave choice at a time. So take what you've learned here, let it settle into your bones, and pass it forward. Because love, real, messy, show up anyway love, is how we prove that truth always, always conquers the shadows. 3 months into Maya's time at Ravenshill Estate, something fundamental had shifted in the Wexler household. The chaos hadn't disappeared completely. Children are children, after all, and healing isn't linear. But the energy was different. Where there had once been destruction born of desperation, there was now creativity born of safety. Where there had once been screaming born of unprocessed grief, there was now conversation born of trust. The boys still had hard days, moments when the weight of missing their mother crushed them so completely that nothing Maya or Adam did could ease the pain. But those moments no longer defined them. They were part of the story, not the whole narrative. And that distinction mattered more than anything. Adam was changing too, in ways that surprised even him. The CEO, who had once measured success in quarterly earnings and market share, was now measuring it in bedtime stories read, soccer games attended, and genuine conversations had with his sons. His colleagues noticed. His board members questioned whether his priorities had shifted too far from business. But Adam didn't care. For the first time in his adult life, he understood what actually mattered. And it wasn't Wexler Tech's stock price. It was the light in Eli's eyes when Adam helped him solve a difficult math problem. It was Noah's fierce hug after a basketball game. It was Ben crawling into his lap during movie nights, trusting completely that his father would hold him. These moments weren't distractions from his real life. They were his real life. Everything else was just noise. Have you ever realized you've been chasing the wrong finish line? That moment of clarity is terrifying and liberating all at once. The breakthrough that would change everything came on a Saturday morning in late January. The boys had been asking about Lena more frequently lately, not in the anguished, desperate way they had months ago, but with gentle curiosity. They wanted to know her favorite color, lavender, her favorite food, her grandmother's chicken pot pie, what she was like before she was their mum, adventurous, funny, fiercely independent. Maya encouraged these conversations, understanding that memory-keeping was a crucial part of grief work. But Adam had been struggling. Every mention of Lena still felt like a knife to his chest. He had loved his wife with an intensity that terrified him, and when she died, he had tried to bury that love along with her body. It was the only way he knew to survive. But Maya, with her gentle wisdom, helped him understand something revolutionary. You don't have to let go of people you love when they die. You just have to learn to carry them differently. That Saturday morning, she proposed something that made Adam's stomach drop with anxiety, creating a memorial altar for Lena in the house. An altar, Adam repeated, his voice uncertain. Like a shrine? Maya shook her head. Not a shrine, a celebration, a place where the boys can go when they miss her, where they can talk to her, leave her drawings, feel connected to her memory. Death doesn't have to mean absence, Adam. It can mean transformation. Lena isn't here physically, but her love is still very much alive in this house. Let's honor that. The idea both terrified and compelled him, but he trusted Maya. So he agreed. They spent that entire day working on it together, all 5 of them. They chose the bay window in the living room, the spot where Lena used to sit every morning with her coffee and watch the sunrise. Maya brought in a beautiful wooden table, and together they covered it with meaningful items. Photos of Lena, laughing at the beach, holding the newborn triplets, dancing at her wedding, hiking in the mountains she loved. Candles in her favorite lavender scent, a vase that the boys kept filled with fresh flowers, taking turns choosing the arrangements, her favorite books, worn and beloved. A journal where anyone could write messages to her, thoughts, updates, feelings that needed to be expressed. The boys approached the project with surprising maturity. Eli carefully arranged the photos in chronological order, creating a visual timeline of their mother's life. Noah selected a playlist of her favorite songs and set up a small speaker nearby. Ben painted a portrait of her from memory. It was abstract and childlike, but it captured something essential about her spirit, a warmth that radiated from the canvas. As they worked, they told stories. "Remember when Mom tried to bake Dad's birthday cake and accidentally used salt instead of sugar?" Eli said, laughing. "And she made us all taste it to make sure it was really as bad as she thought." Adam smiled, the memory bittersweet but no longer unbearable. She laughed so hard she cried. "Then we ordered pizza and ate ice cream cake instead. Remember when Mom took us to the zoo and it started raining? But she said rain was just sky confetti," Ben added. "And we danced in the parking lot until security told us to leave." Noah grinned. "That was the best day ever." These weren't painful memories anymore. They were treasures. And as the family shared them, something beautiful happened. Lena became present again, not as a ghost haunting them, but as a beloved member of the family who just happened to exist in memory rather than in body. When the altar was complete, Maya suggested they each say something to Lena. The boys went first. Eli stood before the altar, his young face serious but calm. "Hi, Mom. I miss you every day, but I'm doing better now. Maya helps us, and Dad is around more. I think you'd be proud of us. We're not falling apart anymore. We're becoming strong, like you always said we were." Noah stepped up next, his voice thick with emotion but steady. "Mom, I'm sorry I was so angry for so long. I thought being mad would hurt less than being sad, but Maya taught me it's okay to feel everything. So I'm letting myself miss you. And it hurts, but it's a good hurt. The kind that means I loved you. I still love you." Ben, the youngest, clutched the portrait he'd painted. "Mommy, I made you this. I hope you like it. I'm trying to remember your voice, but sometimes I forget. Maya says that's okay, that I can keep you in my heart, even if I can't keep you in my ears. I hope you're proud of me. I'm trying to be brave." By the time the boys finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Adam felt something breaking open inside him, a dam that had been holding back 6 months of unshed tears and unspoken grief. He approached the altar, his hands shaking, and for the first time since the funeral, he let himself really look at Lena's face in the photographs. "Lena," he began, his voice cracking immediately. "I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know how any of this works, but I need to say this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there that day. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I fell apart after you left and almost lost our boys in the process. But I'm trying now. I'm really trying. And I hope you'd be proud of the man I'm becoming. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, just the dad. The father who finally understands what you always knew, that love is the only thing that matters." He paused, tears streaming down his face. "I miss you so much it still takes my breath away. But I'm learning to carry you with me instead of trying to bury you. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for giving me these incredible boys. Thank you for every moment we had. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure they know how amazing you were." The room was silent, except for quiet crying. Maya watched from the corner, her own face wet with tears, knowing she was witnessing something sacred, a family choosing to honor their grief instead of running from it. After the altar ceremony, something shifted in the house. It was subtle, but undeniable. The boys started visiting the altar regularly, not with sadness, but with connection. They'd sit there in the morning before school and tell Lena about their day ahead. They'd leave her drawings, report cards, small treasures they found, smooth rocks, pretty leaves, a feather from a blue jay. Adam found himself stopping by the altar too, usually late at night when the house was quiet. He'd sit in Lena's old spot, drink coffee, and talk to her about the boys, about work, about how much he was learning from Maya. It felt less like talking to a ghost and more like talking to a friend who had simply moved to another room. The boys noticed their father's transformation, and it gave them permission to continue their own healing. If Dad could cry and still be strong, so could they. If Dad could miss Mom and still be happy, so could they. If Dad could love Maya's presence without it erasing Mom's memory, so could they. These weren't lessons taught through words, they were lessons modeled through actions. And children learn far more from what they see than from what they're told. Maya understood this deeply. She never tried to replace Lena. She honored her memory, spoke about her with reverence, and made sure the boys knew that loving her didn't mean betraying their mother. "Your mom will always be your mom," Maya told them one evening during a feelings check-in. "I'm not here to take her place. I'm here to walk beside you while you carry her memory. There's room in your hearts for both of us. Love doesn't run out, it multiplies." That concept that love multiplies rather than divides was revolutionary for the boys. And for Adam, think about the people you've loved and lost. Did loving someone new diminish that original love? Or did it prove that your heart was capable of expanding infinitely? That's the truth that shadows try to hide from us. As winter melted into early spring, the Wexler family found themselves in a rhythm that felt almost miraculous, given where they'd started. School mornings were chaotic but functional. Evenings were filled with homework help, dinner conversations, and bedtime routines that the boys actually looked forward to. Weekends included adventures, hiking, museum visits, trips to the coast, that created new memories without erasing old ones. Adam had restructured his work life dramatically. He promoted his COO to handle day-to-day operations, attended only essential meetings, and worked from home 3 days a week. His board was initially horrified, predicting catastrophic consequences for the company. But something unexpected happened. Wexler Tech thrived. Turns out that a leader who was emotionally healthy, well-rested, and genuinely happy was far more effective than one who was burned out, distracted, and running on empty. Adam's creativity returned. His strategic thinking sharpened. His relationships with employees and partners deepened because he finally understood how to connect with people as humans rather than as resources. The business world noticed. Articles started appearing. The CEO who chose family over fortune and won both. How personal tragedy transformed Adam Wexler's leadership style. The new model of work-life integration. Adam did a few carefully selected interviews, using his platform to challenge the toxic hustle culture that had nearly destroyed him. "Success without connection is just expensive loneliness," he said in one viral interview. "I had all the money in the world, and I was still empty. Now I have less time for business and more time for my sons, and I've never been more fulfilled." That's not weakness, that's wisdom. His words resonated with millions of people who were trapped in the same cycle he'd escaped. At home, Maya continued her quiet work of emotional architecture, building structures that would support this family long after she was gone, though none of them could imagine that future yet. She taught the boys conflict resolution skills, helping them navigate their frequent squabbles without resorting to violence or cruelty. She modeled healthy emotional expression, showing them that it was okay to be angry, sad, frustrated, or overwhelmed, as long as you process those feelings constructively. She created traditions that would outlast her tenure. Monthly adventure days, where they explored somewhere new. Weekly gratitude circles, where everyone shared what they appreciated about each other. Daily check-ins, where feelings were named and honored. These weren't revolutionary techniques. They were just consistent, loving practices that created safety and connection. And in that safety, the boys flourished. Eli's grades improved dramatically. Noah joined a youth basketball league and discovered a passion for teamwork. Ben's artwork became more confident and expressive, his paintings transitioning from dark, chaotic images to vibrant, hopeful compositions. They were still the same kids, loud, energetic, occasionally difficult, but they were no longer defined by their trauma. They were defined by their resilience, by their capacity to heal, by their courage to keep trying even when things were hard. Maya watched them grow with the quiet pride of a gardener who plants seeds, knowing she might not see the full harvest, but that's what love does. It invests without demanding immediate returns. It gives without keeping score. It shows up day after day, trusting that consistency itself is transformative. The revenge of trauma might be perpetuating cycles of pain. But the truth, the undeniable, unshakable truth, is that cycles can be broken, with intention, with support, with love that refuses to quit. And this family, they were living proof. If this story is stirring something in you, hope, maybe, or recognition, or a longing for healing you didn't know you had, pay attention to that feeling. It's telling you something important. And maybe, just maybe, it's inviting you to break a cycle of your own, because you're not stuck in the patterns that hurt you. You can choose differently. You can heal. And when you do, you don't just change your own life, you change the trajectory of everyone who comes after you. That's how truth conquers shadows, one brave choice at a time. So let this story move you toward your own breakthrough, and then share it with someone who needs that same reminder. Because healing is contagious, and the world desperately needs more people who refuse to let their pain define them. Spring had fully arrived in Portland, bringing with it a renewal that felt almost symbolic. The gardens at Ravenshill Estate, which had been neglected during the family's darkest months, were blooming again, thanks to Maya's gentle encouragement and the boys' enthusiastic, if chaotic, help. Tulips lined the walkways in vibrant purples and yellows. The cherry trees that Lena had planted years ago exploded with pink blossoms that carpeted the ground like snow. The air smelled of fresh earth and possibility. And inside the house, something even more beautiful was growing, a family that had learned how to love again. Adam Wexler found himself thinking about the future for the first time since Lena's death. Not with dread or avoidance, but with cautious hope. 6 months ago, he couldn't imagine surviving another day. Now, he was planning summer vacations, researching schools for the boys' future, dreaming about what life could look like when you stopped running from pain and started building around it. And at the center of every dream, every plan, every vision of his future was Maya, not as an employee, not as a caregiver, but as family, as partner, as the woman who had saved them all without even trying. The question that consumed him was simple but terrifying. Did she feel the same way? Or was this just a job to her, a chapter she'd eventually close when she moved on to help the next family in crisis? The thought of losing her made his chest tighten with panic, but the thought of telling her how he felt and risking rejection was almost worse. Almost. Because Adam had learned something crucial in the past 6 months. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to act despite it. The decision to propose didn't come suddenly. It crystallized over weeks of small moments that accumulated into undeniable truth. The way Maya laughed at Ben's terrible jokes with genuine delight, the way she mediated conflicts between the boys with patience that seemed infinite, the way she looked at Adam during their late-night porch conversations, not with judgment for who he'd been, but with respect for who he was becoming. The way she had seamlessly woven herself into the fabric of their lives until he couldn't imagine the pattern without her. This wasn't infatuation or desperation or gratitude masquerading as love. This was something deeper, something that had grown slowly and surely in the soil of shared struggle and mutual respect. Adam loved Maya, not because she had fixed his family, but because of who she was, flawed, honest, brave, kind, and stubbornly committed to seeing the best in people even when they couldn't see it themselves. But proposing felt impossibly complicated. He had 3 young sons who were still healing from their mother's death. How would they feel about him loving someone new? Would they see it as betrayal? Would it set back all the progress they'd made? And Maya herself, would she think it was too soon, too complicated? Would she want the burden of becoming a stepmother to 3 traumatized children and a partner to a man who was still learning how to be emotionally available? The questions spiraled endlessly until Carmen, ever the voice of pragmatic wisdom, interrupted his spiral one afternoon with characteristic bluntness. "Stop overthinking this, Adam. Talk to the boys first, then talk to Maya. But stop torturing yourself with hypotheticals. Life is short, love is rare, and that woman has already chosen you and your sons every single day for 6 months. Trust that." So he did. Have you ever been paralyzed by fear of what might go wrong instead of hopeful about what might go right? Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just ask the question. Adam started with the boys. On a Saturday morning, when Maya had gone to the farmer's market, he called them into the living room for a very important family meeting. The triplets sat on the couch, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned. "Am I in trouble?" Ben asked immediately. Adam smiled, his heart aching with love for these complicated, wonderful children. "No, buddy, nobody's in trouble. I just need to talk to you guys about something serious. About Maya." The boys exchanged glances, and Noah leaned forward suspiciously. "You're not firing her, are you? Because if you are, we're going to riot." Adam laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "No, definitely not firing her. The opposite, actually. I want to ask her to stay with us forever, as part of our family, officially." Eli's eyes widened with understanding. "Like, you want to marry her?" The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. Adam nodded slowly. "Yeah, I do. But before I ask her, I need to know how you guys feel about that. Because this isn't just my decision. It affects all of us. If any of you aren't okay with it, I won't do it. You 3 come first." Always. The room went silent as the boys processed this information. Finally, Ben spoke up, his voice small but clear. "Would Maya be our new mom?" Adam chose his words carefully, remembering what Maya had taught him about honoring Lena's memory. "No, buddy. Lena will always be your mom. Nobody can replace her, and nobody should try. But Maya could be another person who loves you. A stepmom, someone who chooses to be in your life not because she has to, but because she wants to. Is that something you'd be okay with?" Ben thought about it for a moment, then nodded decisively. "I like Maya. She makes good pancakes and she doesn't get mad when I'm sad. I want her to stay forever." Noah was next, his analytical mind working through the implications. "If you marry Maya, does that mean she can't leave even if things get hard again? Like she'd be stuck with us?" Adam felt his throat tighten at the question, at the fear underneath it that they were too much, too broken, too difficult to commit to permanently. Marriage is a promise, Noah. It means choosing someone every single day, even when it's hard. So yeah, if Maya says yes, she's committing to all of us for the long haul. But I don't think she'd feel stuck. I think she'd feel lucky. The same way I feel lucky to have you guys." Noah's tough exterior cracked, revealing the vulnerable kid underneath. "Then yeah, I'm okay with it. Maya's cool. And Dad, you've been happier lately." "I like seeing you smile." That left Eli, the deep thinker, who had been quiet throughout the conversation. When he finally spoke, his words carried a wisdom that belied his 6 years. "Dad, do you love Maya the way you loved Mom?" It was the question Adam had been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. "I love them differently, Eli. Your mom was my first love, my partner for over a decade, the person who gave me you 3. That love is permanent. It doesn't go away just because she died. But Maya, I love Maya for who she is, for how she shows up for us, for the way she's helped us heal. Both loves are real. They just exist in different spaces in my heart. Does that make sense?" Eli considered this, then asked the follow-up question that mattered most. Would Mom be mad? Adam felt tears prick his eyes. He knelt down in front of Eli, taking his small hands. "No, buddy. Your mom loved us so much, and if there's one thing I know for certain, it's that she would want us to be happy. She would want us to keep living, keep loving, keep building a beautiful life even though she can't be here to see it. I think she'd be grateful that Maya found us. I think she'd give us her blessing." Eli nodded slowly, processing this. Then, in a move that destroyed and healed Adam simultaneously, he walked over to Lena's altar, stood there for a moment in silence, and whispered, "Is it okay, Mom? Can we love Maya too?" The room held its breath. And then Eli turned back with a small smile. "I think she said yes, so yeah, Dad, you should ask her. We want Maya to be our family." The relief and joy that flooded through Adam in that moment was indescribable. His sons had given their blessing. Now he just had to find the courage to ask the question that could change everything. Planning the proposal became a family project, which felt entirely appropriate. The boys insisted on being involved, each contributing ideas that ranged from practical to absurd. Noah suggested Adam should hire a plane to write "Marry Us" in the sky, which was vetoed on grounds of subtlety. Ben wanted to make Maya a crown out of flowers because she's like a princess, which everyone agreed was adorable and feasible. Eli proposed they do it in the garden at sunset, because that's when everything looks magical, which became the foundation of the actual plan. Carmen helped with logistics, securing a ring that was beautiful but not ostentatious, a simple platinum band with a small sapphire, Maya's birthstone, flanked by tiny diamonds representing the three boys. "She's not a flashy person," Carmen noted. "This suits her." Adam agreed. The date was set for a Friday evening in late April, a week before the 6-month anniversary of Maya's arrival. The plan was simple: a family dinner in the garden, nothing that would make Maya suspicious. Adam would cook, or attempt to cook, Lena's famous chicken pot pie, honoring the past while stepping into the future. The boys would help set up lights and decorations, and when the moment felt right, Adam would ask the question that terrified and excited him in equal measure. The night before, he barely slept, running through every possible scenario. What if she said no? What if this ruined everything they'd built? What if she felt pressured by the boys' presence? But then he remembered what Maya had taught him. Courage means acting despite fear. And love, real love, was always worth the risk. When you find someone who sees you, really sees you, you don't let fear steal that chance. You lean in, you choose brave, you ask the question. The day of the proposal arrived with perfect weather, as if the universe itself was conspiring to help. The boys were electric with excitement, barely able to contain the secret. Maya noticed their unusual energy at breakfast. "You guys are acting weird. What's going on?" "Nothing," they chorused in unison, which was obviously a lie. Maya raised an eyebrow at Adam, who just shrugged innocently. "Kids are weird. What can I say?" She laughed, shaking her head. "You're all terrible liars. But okay, I'll play along with whatever you're planning." The day passed in a blur of preparation. Adam cooked with significant help from Carmen, who had wisely anticipated his culinary limitations. The boys decorated the garden with string lights, paper lanterns, and Ben's handmade flower crown. Eli set up a speaker for music. Noah arranged chairs around the table they'd carried outside. By the time evening arrived, the garden looked like something from a fairy tale. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Adam called Maya outside. She stepped into the garden and stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. "What is all this?" "Family dinner," Adam said casually, though his heart was hammering. "We wanted to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "Being together," Eli answered. "Being a family," Noah added. "Being happy," Ben finished. Maya's eyes filled with tears. "You guys are going to make me cry before we even eat." They gathered around the table, the 5 of them, and shared the meal Adam had painstakingly prepared. The food was imperfect, but made with love. which somehow made it taste better. They told stories, laughed at jokes, and basked in the simple joy of being together. As dessert was finishing, a chocolate cake Ben had helped frost with enthusiastic, if messy, dedication, Adam stood up. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "Maya, can I say something?" She looked up at him, curious and slightly concerned. "Of course. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. That's kind of the point." He took a breath, aware that his sons were watching with rapt attention, that this moment would define the rest of their lives one way or another. 6 months ago, my life was falling apart. I had lost my wife, I was losing my sons, and I didn't know how to fix any of it. And then you walked through our door, and you didn't fix us, not really. You just loved us. You showed up every single day, even when we were difficult, even when it was hard, even when you had every reason to quit. You taught my sons that they were worth fighting for. You taught me how to be present, how to be vulnerable, how to be the father they needed. You took our broken pieces and helped us build something beautiful. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. Not because you saved us, but because of who you are. Brave, kind, stubborn, honest, and absolutely extraordinary. Maya's hands were covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Adam continued, pulling out the ring Carmen had helped him choose. I know this is complicated. I know it's soon. I know I come with 3 wild, wonderful, occasionally infuriating children who are a package deal. But Maya Coleman, I'm asking you, we're asking you, will you marry me? Will you choose us, officially and permanently? Will you let us love you the way you've loved us? Before Maya could answer, the boys jumped in with their own appeals. Eli stood up first. Maya, you taught me it's okay to feel everything. You never made me hide. Will you stay with us forever? Noah went next. Maya, you made our house feel like a home again. You believed in us when nobody else did. Please say yes. Ben, holding the flower crown he'd made, walked over to her with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could muster. Maya, you make the best pancakes, and you give the best hugs, and I love you. Will you be our family? Maya was sobbing now, the kind of tears that come from being seen and chosen and loved in a way you never dared to hope for. She looked at Adam, then at the boys, then back at Adam. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, yes to all of it. Yes to you, yes to them, yes to this beautiful, complicated, perfect family. Yes. Adam slipped the ring onto her finger as the boys erupted in cheers. They swarmed Maya, hugging her from all sides, and Adam joined in, creating a tangle of arms and joy and tears and laughter. In that moment, under a sky full of stars and surrounded by flowers and light, the Wexler family became complete. Not because they'd erased their past or forgotten their pain, but because they'd learned how to carry it together, because they'd chosen love over fear. Because truth, the real, deep truth, that connection heals all wounds, had finally conquered the shadows. If this story makes your heart ache with hope, don't ignore it. That's your soul reminding you that second chances are real, that love multiplies instead of divides, that broken things can become beautiful when held by the right hands. So share this feeling. Pass it forward. Let someone else know that no matter how dark things get, truth always wins, love always conquers, and family, real family, is built not by blood, but by choice. One brave, beautiful choice at a time. 5 years had passed since that spring evening when Adam Wexler knelt in the garden and asked Maya Coleman to build a forever with him. 5 years that had been filled with the ordinary magic of life lived intentionally. School plays and scraped knees, business challenges and family vacations, arguments and reconciliations, growth and setbacks and growth again. The Ravenshill Estate had transformed completely. No longer a mansion haunted by grief, but a home radiant with purpose. And the family inside it. They were unrecognizable from the broken, desperate people they'd once been. The boys were now 11 years old, on the cusp of that complicated transition from childhood to adolescence. But unlike many kids their age, they carried themselves with an emotional intelligence that seemed far beyond their years. They had learned early what many adults never grasp, that vulnerability is strength, that pain acknowledged heals faster than pain buried, that love isn't finite. It expands to hold whoever you invite into your heart. These weren't theoretical lessons. They were lived experiences, woven into the fabric of who the Wexler boys had become. And watching them grow into these remarkable young men was Maya and Adam's greatest achievement, one that no boardroom success or professional accolade could ever rival. Because at the end of your life, nobody remembers your bank account or your job title. They remember how you made them feel, how you showed up, whether you loved well. And this family, they were mastering the art of loving well. Have you ever paused to consider what legacy you're building? Not in monuments or wealth, but in the hearts of people whose lives you've touched. Eli, the eldest by those fateful 3 minutes, had grown into a thoughtful, creative soul with a passion for engineering and design. His room was filled with half-finished projects, bridges made from popsicle sticks, robots built from recycled electronics, blueprints for inventions that ranged from brilliant to hilariously impractical. But more importantly, Eli had become the emotional anchor for his brothers, the one who could sense when Noah was hiding frustration or when Ben was struggling with something he couldn't articulate. "You okay?" he'd ask, sitting beside whoever needed him. "Want to talk about it?" This gift, the ability to create safe space for others, was something he'd learned directly from Maya. She had modeled it so consistently that it had become second nature to him. Eli had also taken a special interest in helping other kids who were struggling. He volunteered at the same youth shelter where Maya had worked in her 20s, spending Saturday mornings mentoring younger children who reminded him of who he'd once been, angry, scared, convinced they were too broken to deserve love. "I was you," he'd tell them with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked through fire and come out stronger. "And if I can get through it, so can you. You're not alone." Watching Eli extend the same grace he'd received was one of Maya's greatest joys. This was generational healing in action, breaking cycles not just for one family, but for countless others who would be touched by this boy's compassion. That's how truth conquers shadows, not in grand gestures, but in small acts of kindness that ripple outward infinitely. Noah had channeled his fierce energy into athletics and leadership. He was the captain of his middle school basketball team, known not for being the most talented player, but for being the one who made everyone around him better. He had inherited his father's strategic mind and his mother's, both mothers', fierce loyalty. But beyond sports, Noah had developed an unexpected passion: public speaking. He had started sharing his family's story at grief support groups, talking openly about losing Lena, about the darkness that followed, about how Maya and his father had helped them find light again. "It's okay to not be okay," he'd tell audiences of children and adults dealing with loss. "But it's not okay to stay in the dark alone. Ask for help. Let people love you. That's not weakness. That's survival." His speeches were raw, honest, and devastatingly effective. Schools started inviting him to talk about resilience and mental health. News outlets featured him in profiles about youth advocacy. But Noah never let the attention go to his head. "I'm just telling the truth," he'd say with a shrug. "If that helps someone else, cool. If not, at least I was honest." That authenticity, that refusal to perform or package his pain into something palatable, made him incredibly effective. Because people can sense when you're real, and Noah Wexler was as real as they come. Young people especially need role models who aren't afraid to be messy, don't they? Who show them that strength includes scars, that heroes have bad days too, that you don't need to be perfect to be worthy. Ben had blossomed into an artist whose work was starting to gain serious attention. His paintings, vibrant, emotional, often depicting themes of loss and renewal, had been featured in local galleries and youth art competitions. But more than technical skill, Ben's art carried something intangible: soul. You could feel the journey in his brushstrokes, the transformation from darkness to light. His signature piece, titled The Garden of Forever, depicted the Ravenshill Estate garden in explosive color, with translucent figures woven throughout. Lena watching from the cherry trees, Maya at the center holding the family together, Adam and the boys building something beautiful from broken pieces. It wasn't subtle, but it was honest, and it had moved viewers to tears at its debut exhibition. Beyond his art, Ben had maintained his tender, empathetic nature. He was the family member most likely to notice when someone was struggling, most likely to offer a hug without being asked, most likely to leave encouraging notes around the house for people to find. "You're doing great, Dad," on Adam's bathroom mirror. "Best stepmom ever," tucked into Maya's planner. "Love you, bro," slipped into Eli's backpack. These small gestures created a culture of affirmation that permeated every corner of Ravenshill Estate. Ben had learned from his own journey that sometimes people are starving for recognition, for someone to simply say, "I see you, you matter, you're enough," and he had made it his mission to ensure nobody in his orbit ever doubted their worth. That's the thing about people who've been through darkness. They become light keepers for others. Adam Wexler had become almost unrecognizable from the emotionally distant CEO who had once measured his worth in market cap and quarterly earnings. He still ran Wexler Tech. The company had actually tripled in value under his more balanced leadership, but work was no longer his identity. It was simply what he did, not who he was. Who he was, at his core, was a father, a husband, a man committed to showing up fully for the people he loved. He had written a book about his transformation, titled The Blind Spot, What I Learned About Success When I Finally Learned to See, which had become a bestseller in business and self-help categories. But unlike many CEO memoirs that were really just ego projects, Adam's book was brutally honest about his failures, his grief, his journey from emotional bankruptcy to wholeness. Readers connected with his vulnerability, especially men, particularly high-achieving men who had been taught that emotions were weaknesses and that presence was less important than productivity. Adam's message was simple but revolutionary. You can have professional success and personal fulfillment, but only if you're willing to prioritize the latter. "I thought I was building an empire," he wrote in the book's final chapter. "But I was really just building walls. Maya and my sons taught me to build bridges instead. And that has made all the difference." The book's proceeds funded a foundation Adam and Maya had started, the Lena Wexler Foundation for Family Healing, which provided free counseling and support services to families dealing with grief and trauma. It was their way of honoring Lena's memory by helping others navigate the same darkness they'd survived. Maya had also evolved, though in characteristically quiet ways. She had finally pursued the credentials, doctor. Monroe had once suggested earning her degree in family therapy through night classes and weekend programs, but she hadn't done it to leave the Wexler family. She'd done it to better serve them and others like them. She now ran a private practice specializing in grief counseling and trauma-informed care, seeing clients from her home office at Ravenshill. But she also trained other caregivers, teaching them the principles that had guided her work: meet people where they are, honor their pain, create safety before pushing growth, love without agenda. Her approach, which she called radical presence therapy, was gaining recognition in professional circles. Universities invited her to speak. Conferences asked her to lead workshops. But Maya remained grounded, never forgetting where she came from or who she served. "I'm not special," she'd insist whenever someone praised her work. "I just show up, consistently, honestly, with love." Anyone can do this if they're willing to be uncomfortable and stay anyway. That humility, combined with her undeniable effectiveness, made her a powerful force in the field of trauma recovery. She was proving what she'd always known. You don't need fancy degrees to heal people. You need genuine care, lived experience, and the courage to sit with pain without trying to fix it. Those qualities can't be taught in classrooms. They're forged in the fires of your own struggle. And Maya's fire had made her unbreakable. When you've survived the worst and come out kind, you become unstoppable, don't you? The Wexler Coleman family, yes. Maya had hyphenated her name, honoring both her chosen family and her individual identity, had also expanded in unexpected ways. They had become foster parents, opening their home to children in crisis, offering temporary sanctuary while permanent placements were arranged. It started with one child, a 9-year-old girl named Sophia, who had been through 4 homes in 6 months and was labeled unadoptable due to her behavioral issues. Maya had taken one look at Sophia's file and seen herself 3 decades earlier. "She's not broken," Maya told Adam. "She's protecting herself. She needs someone who won't give up on her." Sophia stayed with them for 8 months, and in that time, she transformed. The Wexler boys welcomed her like a sister, sharing their toys and their stories and their hard-won wisdom about healing. By the time Sophia moved to her permanent adoptive home, she was a different child, confident, hopeful, capable of trust. But she wasn't the only one who changed. The Wexler boys learned that their healing could become a gift for others, that their home could be a lighthouse for kids still lost in storms. Over the years, they fostered 6 more children, each one leaving an imprint on the family's heart. Some stayed weeks, others months, but all of them left knowing they were worthy of love. And isn't that the greatest gift we can give another human being? The certainty that they matter, that they're not too much, that someone sees their potential even when they can't. On a warm Saturday in late spring, exactly 5 years after Adam's proposal, the family gathered in their beloved garden for a special ceremony. They did this every year on the anniversary of Maya joining the family, a renewal of vows, not just between Adam and Maya, but between all of them. It was their way of acknowledging that family is a choice you make continuously, not just once. Adam went first, as always. "Maya, 5 years ago I asked you to marry me in this garden. Today I'm asking you again. Will you keep choosing us? Through the mess and the beauty, the hard days and the easy ones, will you stay?" Maya smiled, tears already forming. "Yes, always yes." The boys went next, each offering their own vow. "Eli, Maya, thank you for teaching me that it's okay to feel everything. I promise to keep showing up for people the way you showed up for us." Noah, "Maya, thank you for believing in me when I was angry and difficult. I promise to use my voice to help other kids who feel lost." Ben, "Maya, thank you for making our house a home. I promise to keep making art that tells the truth, even when it's uncomfortable." Maya responded to each of them, her voice thick with emotion. "Eli, watching you become a man who leads with empathy is my greatest honor." Noah, "Your courage inspires me every single day." Ben, "Your art reminds me why beauty matters. I promise to keep showing up for all of you, just like you show up for me." Then she turned to Lena's altar, which still held a place of honor in the garden, now surrounded by flowers the boys tended carefully. "And Lena, thank you for these incredible boys. Thank you for loving them so fiercely that even in your absence, they knew what love looked like. I promise to honor your memory by helping them become the men you dreamed they'd be." After the ceremony, as the sun began to set and string lights twinkled overhead, the family sat together at the garden table, the same one where Adam had proposed 5 years earlier. They ate, they laughed, they told stories about the year that had passed. Carmen joined them, as she did for all major family celebrations, bringing her signature terrible jokes and genuine affection. Dr. Monroe stopped by with her partner, celebrating how far this family had come from that first inspection. Even a few of the children they'd fostered, now thriving in permanent homes, came to visit, proof that healing ripples outward. As the evening wound down and the boys ran off to catch fireflies, Adam and Maya found themselves alone for a moment. "Can you believe it's been 5 years?" Adam asked, pulling Maya close. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like you've always been here." Maya rested her head on his shoulder. I feel the same way, like this was always where I was supposed to end up. Do you ever regret it? Taking on this chaos? Maya pulled back to look at him, her expression serious. Adam Wexler, marrying you and choosing these boys is the best decision I've ever made. This chaos, it's not a burden, it's a privilege. Every single day. Adam kissed her softly, overwhelmed with gratitude for this woman who had saved them all, not by fixing them, but by loving them through the process of fixing themselves. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their sons play, watching the sky darken and stars emerge, watching the life they'd built together unfold in real time. The revenge of grief might be isolation. The revenge of trauma might be perpetuating cycles of pain. But the truth, the unstoppable, undeniable truth, is that love conquers all of it. Love that shows up consistently. Love that stays through hard seasons. Love that sees potential in broken things and invests in their restoration. That's the love that heals families, changes trajectories, breaks generational curses. As the final fireflies blinked out and the boys reluctantly came inside for bed, Maya felt a profound sense of completion. This was what she'd been searching for her entire life: belonging, purpose. A place where her past pain had become present wisdom, where her scars had become qualifications, where her story of survival had become a roadmap for others. She had started life as an unwanted baby, labeled illusion by nurses who didn't know her destiny. She had cycled through homes where she never quite fit, always too honest, too emotional, too much. She had worked herself to exhaustion trying to save everyone else while barely surviving herself. And then she had found this family, or maybe they had found her. Either way, she was home. And home wasn't a place. It was a feeling. It was Adam's steady presence. It was Eli's thoughtful questions. It was Noah's fierce loyalty. It was Ben's tender affection. It was a garden filled with memories and hope. It was an altar that honored the past while embracing the future. It was proof that broken things become beautiful when held by the right hands. As Maya tucked each boy into bed that night, she whispered the same thing she said every night. I'm so glad I get to be your family. And each boy, in his own way, whispered back, we're glad too. That exchange, simple, honest, overflowing with love, was everything. It was the answer to every question she'd ever asked about her worth, her purpose, her place in the world. She belonged here. She always had. The universe had just taken a winding path to bring her home. If this story has moved you, changed you, reminded you of what really matters, don't let that feeling fade. Hold on to it. Let it reshape your priorities. Let it remind you that truth always conquers shadows, that love always wins, that second chances are real, that broken families can be rebuilt into something even more beautiful than before. And then share this story. Pass it forward to someone who needs hope, who needs proof that healing is possible, who needs to know they're not alone in their struggle. Because that's how we change the world, not through grand gestures, but through brave, honest stories that remind us we're all connected in our brokenness and our capacity for redemption. The garden of forever isn't a destination, it's a choice. One you make every single day to show up, to love well, to tell the truth, to refuse to let shadows win. So choose brave, choose love, choose truth, and watch what grows.